right, y'all. Let's have a quick conversation. So there I was, leaving work in all my illustrious glory, on the highway, just taking a cruise, and so some thoughts came into your boy Dome, and I want to share them with you, because content, right? So here's the thing. I did a clubhouse last night with the usuals. They know who they are. Shout yourself out in the comment section if you want to. If you want to remain anonymous, that's up to you. But did a clubhouse, and we were discussing a couple things. Mainly the preseason, Lonzo, expectations for the year, yada, yada, yada. I think in consensus, not just from Clubhouse, but everywhere I've seen, there are things that people have taken away from the preseason that they love about Zoe and the Bulls, and there are things that in the preseason I feel like they already had issues with, and it only just compounded how deep those issues were. And so, where does that leave us as far as this team? Now, a couple weeks ago, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I referenced a video, or a couple videos that were here on YouTube of Billy Donovan talking about managing expectations. And I think that's very important here, to manage your expectations. But manage them how, right? So, on paper, right, let's consider this for a moment. Even without Kyrie Irving, Brooklyn and the Bucks are probably the two top teams where there's okay, they're coming out of the East. Then there's Miami, and I know a lot of people are hesitant to put Miami up there, but here's the thing. Miami had what I consider a playoff lull last year because they had that quick-ass turnaround into the season, and it didn't allow for their bodies to heal and recover like it should have. Look, that happened with the Lakers too. They had a lull too, and they didn't perform because, hey, they was hurt. Got to the playoffs, barely, but they lost against an opponent that, truth be told, they really shouldn't have lost to. And so they got an off-season of work and break to recover, get healthy. They made a lot of changes, and now they're going to be back. And the same thing goes and applies for Miami. And they made some key changes too. And I know a lot of people are questionable on Kyle Lowry, but that's been the thing for him the entire career. Now I remember back when what's the coach's name? I think it's Dwayne Casey, who now coaches the Pistons. He was basically pleading with people like he should be in as an All-Star game alternate, a couple years back. And so he's always one of those players where it's like he's good, but, antecedent. Kyle Lowry elevates their profile on paper. He definitely makes them a better team, okay? He's an upgrade from Dragic. None. And whoever the fuck else they had back there. He's a clear upgrade. So they're better just off of him. They managed to retain Victor Oladipo. They're better because of him. They got one of the Morris twins now, if I'm not mistaken. They're better because of him. They're better. They got PJ Tucker. They're better on paper. Okay? They're better on paper. I'm sorry to say this, but there's no way they're not a top 3 seed, at least in the running, right? Then, Philadelphia. Ben Simmons is back. Okay? Now, I know a lot of people are not high on Ben Simmons, and I understand why you feel that way. But this is still Ben Simmons. This is still a guy whose fourth career is like a, 14 or 15 point per game, 7-7 dude. Okay? Pretty good efficiency as far as field goal, but 3-point basket, he don't take too many shots. This is still a very good all-star caliber level player. And I hate to break it to you, but they were the number 1 seed last year. We still got to give them their respect. Had Ben Simmons just dunked the ball on Trae Young, this would have been a completely different offseason. we would be looking at Philadelphia way differently. Who knows? They may have gotten to the finals. And Lord, if they would have gotten to the finals, hurt or not, man, that's a whole different series if we're talking Booker and Ayton and CP3 versus them. But I'm not going to get into that. Look, there's some teams, some tough teams up there. To me, and I'm the one that's saying 60 wins for the Bulls. I still think they're a 60-win team, and I'm not getting off of that. If I lose that one, I lose it. But let's be real for a minute. When it comes to the playoffs, Bulls are not going to be ranked in front of any of these teams. Maybe Philadelphia because of how they feel about Ben. But they're not going to be ranked as the better squad than any of these teams that I just mentioned. And so now we got a team like Atlanta, and then we got Boston, and we got New York. That's the tier or the level that I find or believe that's where the Bulls are at. Okay? Unfortunately, realistically, this is where they're going to fall in most people's rankings this year. This is their power level, so to speak. When we're talking about expectations for this team, that should be about where everybody has them at, unless you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs like me, and you see it differently. But like realistically speaking, and even I gotta admit my thought process is not realistic, but I don't care. I'm pushing the chips to the table. But realistically, if you have them say anywhere between that 5th to 8th seed, you're actually probably correct. And I want you to consider something. And let's look at it from this perspective. Even if you don't think Philly is going to be that good, fine. But Philly is no worse than an 8 seed. But the point here that you have to consider is they're not leaps and bounds better than any of the other teams that I mentioned. They're just not. They need one more piece. Or they need Lonzo to ascend, or they need Zach to ascend. They need that from one of those two guys. Or again, like I said, they need to get another piece. Because as it stands right now, it's very hard to put them outside of that like mid-tier bracket. Okay? When we're talking about the playoffs, different ball game. Every team is good. Even the ones that got in through the playing team, they're all good. There's not a such thing as a bad team. They're all going to be good teams. And so it's going to be a different ball game when, okay, you're on a night of a back-to-back and you got to come see the Chicago Bulls. And they're like rested. They had like 2 days off of the game. That's a whole different scenario than when it's like, all right, man, we got y'all 7 games. What you gonna do? We know what y'all can do. Now we can just work in and focus on you and only you. And our schedules match up because we're matched up with you. This dance is between you and I. So, what are you gonna do? Let me give y'all one better, okay? Because we'll sit here and we'll talk for days about the weaknesses of this team. I don't give a damn what you think. Who on the Chicago Bulls is stopping Joel Embiid or limiting him? Nobody, right? Even if the Philadelphia 76ers were, say, a 5th seed, and we at the 4th seed, that's not going to be an easy series to win. If they can even win that series at all, because Joel Embiid is such a fucking monster. I'm saying all of this stuff to you guys because I want you to think about some things, okay? When we go into the regular season on Wednesday, 2 days from now, we got Detroit, we got New Orleans, we got Detroit. And the second game with Detroit is a back-to-back. We get New Orleans on Friday, then Saturday we get Detroit. This is a marathon, okay? This is a marathon. Now, our team is going to be hungry, and so they might play with a little bit more fervor than, say, the Brooklyn Nets. Or maybe Milwaukee, because Milwaukee will have had a short turnaround, particularly for Chris and Drew, because they played the Olympics. What I want you guys to keep in mind when it comes to expectations for this team, or for any team, because some of you guys are fans of Lonzo that follow me, and you're not necessarily a fan of the Chicago Bulls, just like I'm a fan of the Dallas Mavericks, right? Even though they're in the West. But some of you guys might say, oh, well, I'm a fan of Charlotte, or I'm a fan of New York. This stuff applies to your team, too. Every game is going to matter. And I in the conversation on Clubhouse last night, there was a little disagreement, but some agreement with my point. And I'm going to say it here. And I would like to get you guys' opinion on this. I said I don't give a damn that Brooklyn and Milwaukee are having dreams of coming out the East this year. They do not want to be matched up with each other in the first round. They are going to try to avoid each other in the first or maybe even the second round. Now, Brooklyn, if they had Kyrie, would be a different story. I don't think they would give a damn. But without him, it's just James Harden and Kevin Durant, both whom have had injury issues within the last few years. You're not, look, you went 7 games last year, and people are going to argue about that foot on the line for KD. Look how many minutes that man had to play that entire series just to keep them in the game and give them a fucking chance. And that was what hobbled James Harden. Now, you might say, okay, with a healthy James Harden, that might end a little different. True. But do you also not realize that monster that they had on the other end that they had to play against that won the title this year? He is not going to... Giannis is not going to relent. He's probably going to take another superstar leap. And my God, he's been doing pull-up jump shots this year. He's been doing post-up fadeaway jump shots so far in the preseason. I promise you, they do not want that man in the first round or the second round. I promise you, even Giannis himself is confident, but he got to understand, look, James Harden is an infinitely better player than either of the two guys I got on my side. Now, both of them together might be able to produce value at that same level, but they not on James Harden level individually. If I need to wait and play them later on, give them more chances to get injured, get other teams a chance to fight them. So I promise you, once we get probably around mid-late February, we're going to start seeing a lot of jockeying for position. Let's flip this back to the Bulls. The Bulls' main goal is just to get into the playoffs. And ultimately, they want to win at least one round and get to the second round, so they got something to build off of. But first of all, they just need to get to the playoffs. And they don't want to just get to the playoffs. They want to comfortably get to the playoffs. That means 6 seed. That's their goal, is 6 seed. Think about the teams I mentioned that's ahead of them. Even if you don't agree with the Miami thing or Philly, consider Atlanta, consider Boston, okay? Consider some of these teams. New York, consider what they have. And I want you to think about this like in a serious 7-game series. Think about this too. They only got tested against Cleveland, hobbled New Orleans, and Memphis. Those are the teams that they played. Those are the teams they played. Of those teams, how many were actually in the playoffs the previous year? You don't have to answer that out loud. How many of those were in the playoffs the previous year? Okay. Now consider what whatever the team or teams that got into the playoffs, consider this too. How did they get into the playoffs? What changes happened to their team? Are they going to be on the same level or worse level? How's their competition around them this year? Factor in that with what you saw from the Bulls. Now tell me something. Think about this seriously. Where do you think they are? Now also keep in mind too, and I want to frame this too because I said this also in my clubhouse meetup or hangout last night. This is a team that has a system that works for everybody out there on that team. This is, to me, the system itself. It's like prime Greg Popovich with his guys. His system was a floor and ceiling raiser. This system is in that same vein. It is a floor and ceiling raiser for this team. But this team does not have perfect chemistry just yet. So what are they going to be? When it's all gelling, when they all are on point and they're all hitting, if that happens, who knows? We may never get a game where all of them are like hitting at the same time. But if they are all hitting on all cylinders at once, what is this going to look like? What level are they on? And then after that, consider what their competition will look like when they're all hitting on all cylinders. And now rate or compare the teams. Is that going to change your perception of the Chicago Bulls? Now, once you do that, do it the other way. What is their worst level? What would be the absolute worst? Like if you look at this team and nothing worked out during the season, and do the same thing with all the other teams. New York, Brooklyn, Giannis, like everything just failed. Like they hit their floor. What is this team's floor compared to all the other teams that you've seen? And compare them. Now, the answer is probably going to lie somewhere in the middle of what you think. But here's what I want you guys to take away from this. You understand what their peak could be compared to the other peaks. You understand what their floor could be compared to the other floor. If the mean is somewhere, if what they truly are is somewhere in between, who's the player on the team that you can say on a night in, night out basis can and will compete with the best player on the opposing team and tip the odds in their favor? Who's that guy on the Bulls, if there is one? And that is going to tell you a lot about what this team is. See, this team has a lot of growing pains that it's going to have to go through over the next couple of years. And some roles are going to change, and some beliefs are going to change, and some perceptions are going to change. Not just to the players, but for us too. And I want you guys to just consider this as I get ready to close this video. Oftentimes what we think, I would be willing to say 99% of the times what we think is not what's going to happen on that court. It's not going to happen on the court, people. What we think, what we believe won't happen on the court. Now, sure, there are things like injuries and stuff that can play a part in shifting things. Like, hell, look at the Philadelphia series. I mean, you got the Bucks series with both the Atlanta Hawks and Brooklyn. Some things happen in those series that tip the scales. Hell, even the finals. There was an injury that occurred in the finals that tipped the scales, okay? So let's keep it all the way 100. Things aren't always going to go the way you think they're going to go. So keep your expectations not day to day, because shit like that changes. I'd say keep it season to season. And I don't mean season to season as in, oh, this NBA season versus next. I mean, let's see, usually an NBA season, regular season, is probably somewhat like 6 months, right? I'd say about every month and a half to 2 months, update your processing. If you followed me last year with the Pelicans, I didn't necessarily make a video updating, but what I did is throughout the season, I said, okay, let's see where they are here. Okay, this is where they are, and I talked about and discussed, ad nauseum where they were, how they were looking, what they needed to do. And this is the way you should do it with this team as well. You should adjust every so often. Yes, you have your what you think in the back of your head, but taper your expectations based off of what you're seeing. I say 60 wins, okay? What does it take for them to be 60 wins? They're going to have to win 8 to 7 out of 10 the entire season. They're going to have a lot of streaks to get 60 wins, okay? If after the first, say, 20 games, they're not on that pace, guess what? That's going to have to change. If you're saying they're a 50-win team, how many games do they have to win in a row or out of 10 to get to that? Let me give you a baseline here. 5 out of 5 is a 41-win pace. It's 41 wins. That's 500. So consider what they would have to be to get 50 wins. That's 9 more. That's 9 more wins. What would they have to do to get 60? That's 19 wins. Taper your expectations, people. I'm doing it for me. You should do it for you. It's your boy Jay Strokes. Y'all have a good one. Peace.